Hi guys, Mrs. Tarbutton here. We are carrying on today looking at question 4 of paper 1, the Mr. Fisher paper that you did for your mock exam. So we've already been through question 1, question 2, question 3, and today we are focusing on question 4. Once I've gone through it with you on the Mr. Fisher paper, you will then have a go at answering a question 4 on the Rosabel paper, and you will then submit your answer to that question to your English teacher as part of the evidence base. All right, let's crack on with it. I'm just going to switch the view of my camera. All right, guys, so hopefully you can see there question 4. Let's have a little look at it together. It says here, focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 25 to the end. Now I need to highlight that because I need to make sure that the information that I'm looking at is from line 25 right to the end. You will be given a statement and you'll be asked whether you agree with the statement or not. So let's look at the statement here. A student said, this part of the story where Mr. Fisher is marking homework shows Tibbert's story is better than Mr. Fisher expected and his reaction is extreme. To what extent do you agree? So we're being asked if we agree with something here, but we've got to work out what we're being asked if we agree with. So let's go back to the statement. This part of the story where Mr. Fisher is marking homework shows Tibbert's story is better than Mr. Fisher expected. So does it? Does it show that Tibbert's story is better than Mr. Fisher expected? And his reaction is extreme. All right, so that is what we are being asked. Does this part of the story, line 25 to the end, show that Tibbert's story is better than Mr. Fisher expected? And does it show that his reaction is extreme? Well, let's have a little look at the right part of the story. Okay, so line 25, here we go. This was an uncharacteristically gloomy train of thought, and Mr. Fisher pushed it away. Not all his boys lacked imagination. Alistair Tibbet, for instance, even though he had obviously done part of his homework on the bus. An amiable boy, this Tibbet. Not a brilliant scholar by any means. Okay, right, so this is what Mr. Fisher thinks of Tibbet. He's not a brilliant scholar, but there was a spark in him which deserved attention. Okay, so Mr. Fisher, does he think the story's going to be good? No, he doesn't. Tibbet's not a brilliant scholar, but there's something in him which, deserves attention. So is Mr. Fisher thinking this story is going to be good? Not really. He thinks it might be better than the others, but he doesn't think it's going to be great. Now let's see what happens next. Mr. Fisher took a deep breath and looked down at Tibbet's exercise book, trying not to think of the snow outside and the 5 o'clock bus he was now almost certain to miss. 4 books to go, he told himself, and then home, dinner, bed, the comforting small routine of a winter weekend. But gradually, sitting there in the warm classroom with the smell of chalk and floor polish in his nostrils, Mr. Fisher began to experience a very strange sensation. Oh, all right. This is Mr. Fisher's reaction. Now, he's not just experiencing a sensation. He's not just experiencing a strange sensation. He's experiencing a very strange sensation. So, I think that's a pretty extreme reaction, isn't it? It began as a tightening in his diaphragm. That is actually quite an extreme reaction. To be reading something that causes your diaphragm to tighten, that's quite extreme. As if a long unused muscle had been brought into action. Now that is extreme. He hasn't felt this kind of feeling for a long time. Okay? His breathing quickened. Come on, guys, that's an extreme reaction, isn't it? If you've ever read anything that makes you out of breath. His breathing quickened, stopped, quickened again. That is extreme, to be holding your breath, stopping your breath when you're reading something, and then for it to quicken even more. And then look at this next phrase, you guys. I mean, it's disgusting, but it's extreme. He began to sweat. What a horrible image, really, but what an extreme image. And when he reached the end of the story, Mr. Fisher put down his red pen and went back to the beginning. Ah, okay. So this story must have been better than he was expecting. Because if it was a rubbish story, you're not going to go right back to the beginning, are you? But he has gone right back to the beginning and he's rereading every word very slowly and with meticulous care. So he's not just rereading it, he's sort of looking at every single word with great care. Now that shows us that the story is better than he was expecting. Right, let's look at the last bit then, because it says line 25 to the end. So here we go, here's the end bit. This must be what a prospector feels when, discouraged and bankrupt, ready to go home, he takes off his boot and shakes out a nugget of gold the size of his fist. Now, if you just clench your fist for a moment and look at the size of your fist, okay? If I found a piece of gold as big as my fist, I would actually be pretty overwhelmed. I'd feel quite excited by that, okay? Finding a massive piece of gold. And that's what he's saying Tibbott's story is like. Tibbott's story, it's like finding a nugget of gold the size of your fist. Now, not only is that quite an extreme reaction, it's also telling us that Tibbott's story is better than he thought it was going to be. And now look what's happening. He read it again. So for a third time, he's reading it for a third time. So that again shows us that it is better than he thought it was going to be. So he read it again, critically this time, marking off the paragraphs with notes in red. A hope which at first Mr. Fisher had hardly dared to formulate swelled in him and grew strong. He found himself beginning to smile. So there's more of his reaction. He's beginning to smile. And this is an extreme reaction for Mr. Fisher, because we get the impression he's not really a very happy, smiley guy. And here he is, he's about to miss the bus, but he's still smiling. So that's an extreme reaction, isn't it? Telling us that the story is better than he thought it was going to be. All right, last little bit. If anyone had asked him what Tibbott's story was about, Mr. Fisher might have been hard put to reply. There were themes he recognised, elements of a plot which were vaguely familiar, an adventure, a quest, a child, a man. But to explain Tibbott's story in these terms was as meaningless as trying to describe a loved one's face in terms of nose, eyes, mouth. This was something new, something entirely original. Now, to end the source like that actually does tell us that this story is way better than Mr. Fisher thought it was going to be. Because if we go back to sort of partway through the story, in fact, just before line 25, if we look here, it tells us here, they had come to the end of the seam, he understood. There were no more stories to be written. The magic had run out. So halfway through the source, Mr. Fisher he's given up and he's saying there is nothing new to be created. But we get to the end of the source and he's saying, wow, this is something new. This is entirely original. So if we look very quickly, you can hear me folding my piece of paper over. I'm just going to fold it over so you can see the bits that we've been asked to focus on. We've been asked to focus on lines 25. Let me get that right so you can see it. Line 25. Oh, maybe if I move. It's tricky doing this because you can't exactly see what it is that you're doing. Let me fold that bit. Okay, line 25. There we go. We've almost got it. But if you look there, line 25 through to the end, you can see that we've got a few things highlighted there. Now, is the story better than Mr. Fisher thought it was going to be? Well, let's look here. He didn't think it was going to be that great, did he? Because Tibbott's not a brilliant scholar. He thinks he deserves attention, but he doesn't think it's going to be that great. But look what happens. The reaction is extreme. Very strange sensation. Tightening in his diaphragm. A muscle that hasn't been used for a long time has now come back into action. His breathing quickened, stopped and quickened again, and he's grossly sweating, okay? And then he rereads it again. So the reaction is hugely extreme, okay? And actually, we think the story is way better than he thought it was going to be, because we've got this nugget of gold, this metaphor here, and he's read it again, and his reaction, it's made him smile. And then we've got this last bit here. This was something new, something entirely original, which contrasts with what he said earlier, where he basically said all of the ideas had run out. So we've highlighted enough now to begin to formulate our answer to the question, which basically says, Tibbet's story is better than Mr. Fisher expected, and his reaction is extreme. Do we agree? And I think we would say that we agree with both, don't we? Tibbet's story is better than Mr. Fisher expected, and Mr. Fisher's reaction is extreme. Now let's have a little look at the mark scheme answers, okay? We're going to just work our way through, as we have done before, a level 1 answer through to a level 4, and then we'll look at the Rosabel question. So here we go. Here's a level 1 answer. As always, it's got simple, limited comment. So here's the answer. Mr. Fisher thinks Tibbet's homework is going to be bad, but it turns out to be good. It says not a brilliant scholar by any means, so Mr. Fisher didn't expect it to be any good. I agree. Mr. Fisher's reaction is extreme. This is shown in the short sentence. His breathing quickened, stopped, and quickened again. All right. Now that is making simple, limited evaluative comments. It shows a limited understanding, and it selects simple textual references. Okay. And it does focus on the statement, because we've got the phrase repeated there about Mr. Fisher's reaction is extreme. It's a repeated phrase from the question, and Mr. Fisher thinks Tibbet's homework is going to be bad. So that is a level 1 answer. Okay, let's have a look then at a level 2 type answer. This is going to show some evaluation, and it was going to score somewhere between 6 and 10 marks. Okay, remember this is out of 20. So let's look at the actual answer. Mr. Fisher expected Tibbet's homework to be bad. He says not a brilliant scholar. He also took a deep breath, which tells us he didn't really want to mark the book. I think Mr. Fisher is surprised when he discovers Tibbet's story is good, and I agree he has an extreme reaction. He starts to sweat, and his breathing quickened, stopped, and quickened again. Now here comes the evaluative kind of statement. This is a short sentence used for effect. You can read it really quickly, and it makes it seem like he can't breathe properly because he's so excited. Okay, so can you see how if you just look here, this answer just stops with the quotation, but this answer evaluates the quotation a little bit more and talks about the effect. You can see it just here, talks about the effect on the reader. Okay, let's have a look at a level 3 answer then. Okay, so level 3 is now going to show clear, relevant evaluation, and this is going to score somewhere between 11 to 15 marks. Mr. Fisher says Tibbet wasn't a brilliant scholar by any means, despite having a spark in him, so I don't think his expectations of Tibbet's homework were high. He even took a deep breath before he started marking, which suggests he was dreading it and maybe thought he was wasting his time. When he reads the story, he discovers it's really good because it's original, and he's surprised and stunned. The writer conveys his extreme reaction by varying the sentence length as Mr. Fisher reads the story. The short, sharp sentence, his breathing quickened, stopped, quickened again, implies that Mr. Fisher is rushing through Tibbet's work as if in disbelief. This is followed by a long, complex sentence that includes the rereading every word slowly and with meticulous care. This slows the pace right down, suggesting Mr. Fisher is now taking his time to see if what he has found can possibly be true. Okay, so if we look here, this is evaluating clearly the effect on the reader. It's showing clear understanding of writer's methods, although really to get the top band, to get top 15, you'd need to evaluate a few more methods than just sentence lengths. It selects a range of textual references and it makes clear and relevant response to the focus of the statement. But as I said, for the full 15 marks, you need to pick out a few more techniques other than just short, sharp sentences and slowing the pace down. Okay, let's look then at the last level, level 4. Now you can see here it's longer, doesn't quite fit on my screen, and it says here that it's perceptive detailed evaluation, and this is for the full 16 to 20 marks. Okay, so let's read it through. Mr. Fisher is resigned to his students' lack of imagination, and we learn that his expectations of Tibbet are low, despite a spark in him which deserved attention. Tibbet is not a brilliant scholar by any means, and had obviously done part of his homework on the bus. Mr. Fisher even took a deep breath before marking Tibbet's book. The triple, home, dinner, bed, emphasising to the reader the domestic distractions he would rather be doing. However, when he reads Tibbet's story, I think Mr. Fisher is astounded because it's unique, totally fresh, and something entirely original. He experiences a moment of sudden realisation that is so profound he will never look on life in the same way again. Everything he previously believed about stories has been shattered, and his reaction is not only emotional but physical. That's a lovely observation there. It's not just an emotional reaction but a physical reaction. The writer conveys this by juxtaposing short, snappy sentences with long, complex ones to imitate the stages of astonishment Mr. Fisher goes through. His breathing quickened, stopped, quickened again, suggests he is swiftly scanning through Tibbet's homework in disbelief, the rhythm mirroring his rapid heartbeat. So there we've got the idea that it's a physical reaction as well. This is followed by a lengthy sentence that includes the phrase, rereading every word slowly and with meticulous care. Here, the pace slows down to reflect Mr. Fisher retracing his steps much more thoroughly, incredulous at his discovery. Now, obviously, it needs to be rounded off to get the full top marks. It needs to restate something from the question here. Therefore, I do agree that Tibbet's story is profoundly better than what Mr. Fisher had expected, and that Mr. Fisher's physical and emotional reaction is extreme. Okay, now hopefully that's kind of jogged your memory from the mock exam. What we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to look at the same question but on the Rosabel paper. Okay, so here it is. Still worth 20 marks, you'll notice. Okay, but let's have a little look at the statement. Oh, sorry, first of all, let's look at where we need to read from. So we need to look at lines 19 to the end, and I'm going to read that to you in just a moment. A student said, this part of the story, set in the hat shop, shows that the red-haired girl has many advantages in life, and I think Rosabel is right to be angry. To what extent do you agree? So we have to figure out, what is it asking us? It's asking us if we agree with something, but what is it asking us whether we agree with? So let's go back to the statement. The red-haired girl has many advantages in life. Do we agree with that? Do we think the red-haired girl has many advantages in life? And Rosabel is right to be angry. Do we think Rosabel is right to be angry? Okay. Now, obviously, if you've got this printed out in front of you as I'm reading, you can highlight and annotate. If you haven't, then you can just write notes down on a piece of paper, and you can pause this now as we're going through it. But what you're looking for is between lines 19 to the end. Do you agree that the red-haired girl has many advantages in life? And do you agree that Rosabel is right to be angry? Okay, so let's find lines 19 onwards. Okay, here we go. Lines 19 will always be written down for you to the end. So I'm just going to read, and as I'm reading, you can either highlight on your own copy or make notes. Do you agree that the red-haired girl has many advantages? And do you agree that Rosabel has a right to be angry? All right, here we go then. But there had been one other, a girl with beautiful red hair and a white skin and eyes the colour of that green ribbon shot with gold they had got from Paris last week. Rosabel had seen her carriage at the door. A man had come in with her, quite a young man, and so well dressed. "What is it exactly that I want, Harry?" she had said, as Rosabel took the pins out of her hat and tied her veil and gave her a hand mirror. "You must have a black hat," he had answered, "a black hat with a feather that goes right round it and then round your neck and ties in a bow under your chin, and a decent-sized feather." The girl glanced at Rosabel laughingly. "Have you any hats like that?" They had been very hard to please. Harry would demand the impossible, and Rosabel was almost in despair. Then she remembered the big, untouched box upstairs. "Oh, one moment, madam," she had said. "I think perhaps I can show you something that will please you better." She had run up breathlessly, cut the cords, scattered the tissue paper, and yes, there was the very hat, rather large, soft, with a great curled feather and a black velvet rose. Nothing else. They had been charmed. The girl had put it on and then handed it to Rosabel. "Let me see how it looks on you," she said. Oh, can you see that? There we go. Rosabel turned to the mirror and placed it on her brown hair, then faced them. "Oh, Harry, isn't it adorable?" the girl cried. "I must have that." She smiled again at Rosabel. "It suits you beautifully." A sudden ridiculous feeling of anger had seized Rosabel. She longed to throw the lovely perishable thing in the girl's face and bent over the hat, flushing. "It's exquisitely finished off inside, madam," she said. The girl swept out to her carriage and left Harry to pay and bring the box with him. "I shall go straight home and put it on before I come out to lunch with you," Rosabel had heard her say. All right, now that's the bit you're focusing on. And I want you to think about this now. What advantages does the red-haired girl seem to have, particularly in contrast to Rosabel? If we think about the way that that passage starts with Rosabel, I'll just show you quickly. Let's look at the start. Remember, she's bought herself some flowers, some violets, and that's why she had so little tea. So all she's eaten all day is a scone and a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa. And she's working really hard, and she's on this bus, and it's all, look, if we look here, her feet were horribly wet and her skirt would be coated. So that's Rosabel's life. And then we've got the red-haired girl. Okay, the red-haired girl who, if you think about it, she's got her own carriage, she's got the man to help her, and she can have exactly what she wants. She doesn't even know what she wants. She has to have the guy tell her what she wants. And he's telling her that she needs this exquisite hat. Okay, and then we've got these kinds of phrases. They've been very hard to please. And Rosabel's working really hard to try and please them. And then she gets to try the hat on and it looks lovely on her. But is Rosabel going to be the one that gets to buy it? Is Rosabel going out for lunch? Has Rosabel got some man who is going to stay there and pay for it? If we look here, it's exquisitely finished off. The girl's swept outside. So Rosabel's talking to her. And while Rosabel's talking to her, the girl sweeps outside, leaving Harry to pay. And Harry is going to be carrying the box. Now, what do you think would happen if Rosabel could even afford that hat? Would she have a carriage to go and jump into? Would she have some man happy to carry the box for her? And then would she get to go out for lunch? So I want you to think about all of those things as you try to answer this question. Now remember, it is worth 20 marks, so you need to be making some extended kind of points and explaining whether you agree. Has the red-haired girl got many advantages in life? And is Rosabel right to be angry with her? Or just right to be angry actually is what it's asking. Do you think Rosabel is right to be angry? Okay, so you are going to probably spend about 20 minutes on that answer, and you are going to upload it for your teacher to mark. And then the next one we'll be looking at question 5, writing your own story, and then we are done. You have had a second go at an English language paper 1 as evidence for your teacher assessed grade. All right, so work hard, you guys. Go back to any part of the video that you might need to revisit for some help. But as I say, hand your work into your teacher. All right, thank you. Work hard. Bye.